What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter and X. Where your questions, your comments, your concerns, your greetings, whatever you want to say to us, even if you're just saying hello like Yuki Matsui, they all come in real time, which means we can see them, we can react to them. Happy New Year. Happy holidays, all that stuff in the rearview mirror. I think we talked about it last week, but you know what? If you weren't here last week watching live, all the well wishes go out to you. John Saponaro out in Los Angeles, California, and that means my co-host Matt Ibby Ibanez holding it down back in New Jersey. Ibby, we got a lot to do today. How you feeling?
I'm feeling so good today, John. Super excited for the guests that we have on. We've been promoting it for the last couple of days, couple of weeks. Had a great convo with him a couple of weeks ago, obviously, at the QBC. Very thankful that he's going to be coming out to the show. You're going to intro him in a moment. I know some people in the chat, based off of Twitter today, were very curious as to what my hat choice for the day was going to be. Shout out to Rael in the chat right now. So as you can see, I did go with the classic Met hat, but not only the classic Met hat, can't really see it over here. The 2015 emblemed hat for the World Series, which is very fitting for our guest today. Of course, David Wright as well on the shirt for a big game when he scored that run at home and let out that exuberant scream that all Mets fans did at the same time. It's very fitting for our guest today, and I'm very pumped up to have a conversation with him yet again. Not only for myself and for John and the show, but for everyone here that wasn't able to get to the QBC. I think you're gonna have a great time today. So I'm gonna throw it back to John. We can get started.
Well, you know what? Your hat is already getting rave reviews. Shay saying claps for Ibby's hat. I will say this. I have never bought a World Series hat, the World Series emblem hat, any of the years that the Mets have played in the World Series, and I just refuse to do it unless they win that World Series. And it's just because it just hurts me. It hurts me. I've been real close a couple times, and it hurts my soul to then have it in the collection. I have too many Jets jerseys of players that I thought were going to be good that I had to then donate to Goodwill. So it hurts me. I can't look at the emblem, but I respect it. And my outfit choice is also representative of our guest. Subway to Shay says, the blazer means business. Let's go, fellas. And yes, because at the QBC, this man came out for his interview with Lori Rubinson, who's been a guest on the show multiple times, the great Lori Rubinson from WFAN. And he sat down and he said, it's the big leagues. You got to wear a jacket. And so you know what? I said, we're casual on this show, but I'm going to put the blazer on for our guest. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Former manager of our New York Mets, of course, the National League champion New York Mets in 2015, the one and only Terry Collins. Terry, thank you so much for joining the show. Happy holidays and all of that to you. How you feeling?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I certainly had a great time at the conference. Met a lot of fans and really enjoyed myself, and of course, we know what a passionate fan base they were, and it was really fun to be there.
You know, Terry, the QBC's in the rearview mirror for over a month now, but I do want to talk about your experience there because I've been involved with four of them, I believe, thus far, and every one of the players and former manager, anybody who's been involved, current players, former players, whoever it is, has been so gracious giving their time. But no one as much as you. I mean, you were down there at 7 a.m. when people were still setting up, having coffee and a bagel and just, chatting with everybody. Then you were back a little bit right before we started, just checking everything out. Just your commitment to being there to really meet Met fans and see what this was all about. And, I think that was Mets fans love you, rightfully so, but I think that took their appreciation for you, at least the ones that were there, to a whole nother level. Did you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the most things that was most enjoyable to me was I've heard about this guy that people say looks like me, and he wears my number. He goes out and he signs autographs, and and I will tell you, I got to meet him at the thing, and he was so gracious, so excited to he's got to talk, and I spent a lot of time. I had a great time in New York, and I really appreciate the fan base in New York. Yeah, I wish we'd have won the World Series. I wish we'd had more wins, but. It is what it is, but I still appreciate their passion. It's a unique spot. I've done a lot of podcasts about some of the other places I've been. I did one this morning comparing New York to when I was in Houston or when I was in Los Angeles. There is no comparison. There's, that's the biggest stage in all of baseball and all sports, really. And when you buy into it, and when you buy into what the fans expect, and give them some time, they respond.
Hey, Ibby, that's funny because it's a perfect segue to, I know, something you wanted to ask Terry.
Yeah.
You talked about it already today, this morning, but Ibby, go ahead, take it away.
No, I mean, for the most part, you answered it. And my first question on the list, once I found out that you were going to be on the show, was, how does the New York fan compare to the other stops that you had, whether it was in Japan, in Houston, Anaheim? And for the most part, you answered it right there. I guess, does it push you more, even though you're not going on the field, you're managing a group of men and all that goes along with the job itself? Does it still push you does it push you even more knowing that when you're in New York, how much you're going to face, whether it is from the fans themselves, from the media in particular, when you have to sit at that desk during a pregame or postgame?
Yeah, one of the things I used to try to do with the players, and it always started in spring training, you have the pre-spring training meeting with all your players. And one of the things I talk about, because we're a huge draw down here in Florida. Mm-hmm. So that first day of spring training, I mean, there's 200, 300, 400 people that are out there to see the players. And you know what? I used to tell the guys, just respect them. Just respect them. You know what? Yeah, they're going to say some crazy things once in a while, but it's what they are, and the fact that they love the team. They're always going to be there. And I'm going to tell you what, you play the game right, they're going to come out and watch it. And that ultimately is what we got to have.
Yeah, we'll jump back into the comments. A lot of people right now just, sharing their stories. Yuki saying, I met Terry at a restaurant in LIC in 2014. We have Keith, who is one of the organizers of the QBC. Keith Blacknick saying, I just have to say how awesome it was to have Terry there. The fans couldn't get enough, and all of us who ran it loved having him there throughout the day. Aunt Rivera, Subway to Shea, who's got another great Mets podcast, says, Terry gave me a few minutes in the lobby and the elevator ride up. You're the best, Terry. Thank you. And Jeff Cohen saying, met Terry at fantasy camp. Great guy to talk to. So, Terry, it's not just us blowing smoke because you decided to do our show. As a lot of people have a lot of great things to say about you. And, I do want to piggyback off of, what Ibby asked you and just your time as a manager, because, you had a reputation earlier in your managerial career of, being the tough guy, being that disciplinary guy. And, there was a question of, what you were going to be like when you got to the Mets. And, you did have to address that. But what was the change for you? What was the catalyst? Because, look, all of us that watched you in your tenure with the Mets, we know you're tough. We know you don't take any garbage from anybody, but anybody who's ever talked to you, as evidenced by the comments, you're so kind and you're so considerate and you're so caring, everything that you say. So where did you, or when did you find that balance between, I got to push these guys, but I'm also going to be a little easier. Like where was that line for you? Well,
when I first started managing, and even in the minor leagues, I really respected the game. I respected, if it wasn't for baseball, where would I be? And so I thought you had to give something back to the game. So I only played one way. I'm a little guy. I certainly didn't have great ability. So I had to play the game hard. And I always thought that, that's the only way to pay the fans back and pay the game back is by going out and giving it on a nightly basis your maximum effort. And so, yeah, I was intense. Throughout my career, but that's who I was. And, I had years and years ago, Walter Alston told me, one of the greatest managers of all time, told me one time, he said, Terry, the players will take on the personality of the manager if they respect him. And so I always thought, if I can get some good players who want to play the game as hard as I had to play the game, we're going to be okay. We're going to be successful because, there's a lot of times where that energy and that, that drive wins games for you. And so when, and it really didn't work in Houston, in Anaheim, they're a little bit more laid back. It didn't work there very well. And I said, if I ever get another chance, I'm going to enjoy the job. I'm going to enjoy the job more. And I did. I came to New York and I approached the players differently. I let the players set down the rules so they could police their own clubhouse. I wasn't always around all the time. And it's really hard in New York because of all the media that you have to deal with. So I decided, I'm going to have more fun with the job itself. And so I try to be more interactive with the fans and with the media. There's so many of them. You have to respect their job and make sure you give them time, no matter who they are. And so I did that. And I think at the end, I look back now and I certainly don't feel sorry for anything I did.
When you look at your time with the Mets, obviously the great run in 2015 is a highlight, I'm sure, for you, for everybody on that team, for all of us as Mets fans. But I don't know, aside from that, or even just a smaller example, like when you look back at your tenure with the Mets, was there something that jumped out at you that was your favorite moment, your best moment, whatever it is? Again, aside from the World Series run.
Well, obviously, Johan Santana's no-hitter. I mean, if you guys got to know Johan and what a tremendous competitor he was, and how important he was to the ball club to have that guy be the first guy ever to pitch a no-hitter with the New York Mets, with all of the great pitching history that came to that organization, was very special to me. I had a great relationship with Johan, even after it was over. And I knew, because of the distance he had to go in the game, pitch count wise, that there might be some issues. And, he never failed to respond and said, I'm okay. I'm okay with it all. You gave me the opportunity to do something nobody else could ever do, and I can't repay you for that. So, that moment was great. To watch Jose Reyes win a batting title, to watch R.A. Dickey win the Cy Young. R.A. Dickey, when I first came to the Mets, I was the fuel coordinator. He was one of the first guys cut by the Mets. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, here it is 2 years later, this guy's winning a Cy Young, and the way he worked and the way he went about it, carried himself, was just outstanding. And those are great moments for me.
It's funny when you bring up R.A. Dickey, because unfortunately, over the course of the Mets' existence, they haven't had tremendous success with signing free agents. They've done really well in trade markets and extending those people. Mike Piazza, Johan Santana, but outside of, or Carlos Delgado comes to mind. There's so many, obviously Keith and Gary. But, they haven't had a tremendous amount of success when it comes to bringing in free agents. Carlos Beltran, a great example. Curtis Granderson, who you managed, a great example. But you look at R.A. Dickey, and for where he was signed and what he was signed for and what he went on to do, Terry, I think you can make the case that he's the greatest free agent signing in Mets history. I know that's a lot to say, but you can make that argument.
Well, that is a lot to say, because they've signed some really good free agents. But, certainly with what R.A. went through, here's a guy who had to change who he was. I mean, a number one draft choice, a guy who had a good arm. And it's pretty funny. The one injury that, affects all the pitchers, he never had to worry about it because he didn't have an ACL in his elbow. And so, it was amazing that he had to take such a tremendous cut when it came to his signing bonus. But here's a guy who reinvented himself, stuck with it, had some tough times coming down the road, got to the big leagues, didn't change anything, and made himself a complete pitcher. Not just with the knuckleball, but, he was a tremendous fielder. He held runners great. He could hit. He could bunt. He did all the things that you want a pitcher to do. And yet, the fact that he had to reinvent the kind of pitcher he became was, and to culminate it with the Cy Young is tremendous.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, for everybody who's watching live right now, of course, this is Till Mets Do Us Part. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby, Ibanez. We are live with the one and only former manager of our New York Mets, Terry Collins. Ibby, speaking of manager, I know that there's a question that has been burning for you to ask Terry Collins with regards to the relationship, manager, front office, so
absolutely.
What? Take it away, man.
I mean, I've always been curious, Terry, and I think, during your tenure and as we were going more towards, when you finished up with the Mets, things in the game itself were changing. Maybe you can elaborate on that in general. But in terms of when you were there and how, I'll put it like this. When you were there versus how you think it might be now, is there that much input like fans believe there is between front office and what's going on down on the field in terms of lineups, in terms of bullpen, in terms of when guys are being used, not used? Is there that much of a phone call away, if you will, that's going to come to you and say, hey, this is what we want to do, or hey, here's the paper, this is what's going to happen, for tonight's game or today's game?
Well, I really can't answer that today because I'm not in the dugout anymore and I'm not in the clubhouse. I do believe that happens today. I was very fortunate. I had great respect for Sandy, and he never, even though we discussed certain things like, hey, look, who you got tonight in your bullpen? Who don't you have? But he left those decisions to me. That the manager, the one hammer he's always had was the lineup card. And when that's taken away from you and your lineup's written by somebody else, there's got to be a little piece of the player that loses a little respect for the guy who's calling the shots, because how do they know who's calling the shots? And so I had that with Sandy. He let me do my job. I respected him for it. I think there was a lot of times where we talked about certain situations, like, hey, have you thought about moving this guy up in the lineup or moving this guy down in the lineup? Or have you thought about putting this guy, maybe get him out of the back end of the bullpen? And, different things like that. Because, when you're in the hunt, like, down in that clubhouse with these guys, a lot of times somebody on the outside can have a little different perspective. And the one thing as a leader, in my opinion, you have to do is listen. That's what they tell you. That's why they give you 2 ears and one mouth, to listen. And so I listened to what Sandy had to say, or even some of the scouts. J.P. Richardi, former general manager himself, great relationship with him. So I think you've got to use the coaches. I mean, I use my coaches a lot for decision-making stuff. But I didn't have, when I walked in, a lineup on my desk. I wrote the lineup. Okay. And so maybe if Sandy didn't agree with it, we might have a discussion with it. But he let me run that lineup card, and that made a big difference.
I mean, for everybody's listening, watching Mets Twitter, everybody out there, I mean, you're hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, because I know a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with Sandy across Mets fandom. And I think part of it is because they feel like maybe he was too meddlesome and, that he was the quote-unquote smartest guy in the room. Not my words, but what other people have said.
Correct.
And so it's nice to hear it directly from you, Terry, where, hey, he gave you, full reign to be a manager.
And autonomy, yeah.
PB, Patty and NYC saying it should still be the manager making the lineup. And, I think this is an easy question for you, Terry, but I'm sure you feel that way, right? Based on everything that you've said, where, there should be this balance back and forth. But I mean, if you take the lineup card away from the manager, basically it's down to in-game decisions, and that's it. And you're hamstringing the guy from day one, because you didn't give him the opportunity to set the team up. And now he has to make decisions with that lineup that he maybe didn't want to run out there in the first place.
Well, that's, and in today's game, that's why they have the numbers guys, the analytical department, because so the general manager really doesn't have to, but they go with him with their ideas. I didn't have that. At the end, they started, some of the analytical stuff came down like, hey, look, here's your best options against this guy tonight. Hit him wherever you want. That was the thing. But no, there was never a lineup down there. And I really thank Sandy for that. That made my job easier. And again, when you come to decisions, let me tell you something. I don't care what the numbers say. If you've watched enough baseball as I have, you can tell. I had some of the greatest players of all time tell me, you know what? When you want to take a pitcher out, the other team will dictate when he comes out. They'll tell you when they start barreling the ball up, get him out. Yeah. But when I was in Anaheim, one of my pitchers was Chuck Finley, who was one of the best pitchers in baseball. Like when I had him, he's like 15-year veteran already. And pitch counts all of a sudden came to the forefront. And so we put together a program where there were certain pitch counts these guys I had to adhere to with some of these pitchers. And Chuck said, look, you're the manager. You do whatever you want. But I'm going to tell you, there are nights it's easy. There are nights I've got my curveball, my split, I'm locating my fastball. 120, 125 pitches is easy. There's another night when I feel great, but I have to get out of a jam in the first inning. I got to get out of the jam in the second inning. And by the fourth inning, I got 65 pitches and I'm out of gas. So, and you can see that on the side. You don't have to have numbers to dictate that. But, when you've got guys who, like Jake DeGrom, when the game started, I used to say, well, I know I'm getting 7 out of this guy. Because he was such a competitor that I knew he would work his way through even tough situations because he'd done it. Now you're looking at guys, 5 innings, they've not had to pitch out of a jam yet, and they're coming out of games. And so it's kind of made it really, really tough on the bullpen. And, and that's where, for years, in recent years, bullpens are now one of the biggest things on every team, and you're wearing them out. You're wearing them out starting in April. So it's very, very tough for me. When I look at rosters today and I see the number of people they run through in the bullpens, and up and down. A guy throws an inning tonight and he's back in the minor leagues tomorrow, and somebody else comes up. Well, you know what? That's how the game is today. I wanted the best guys out there. I didn't want to keep running guys from Double-A out, when you're trying to win a pennant.
Yeah, I mean, Patty's saying, preach, Terry, 100%. Because, look, I think a lot of the old school baseball fans agree with you. A lot of people think analytics and all the numbers and all the college stuff and all the things, they think it's a dirty word. They don't think it has a place in the game. I tend to fall a little bit in the middle because I think that there is a place for it, right? I think, exit velocity matters. It's not the most important thing. It shouldn't be, right? People fall in love with a guy who's got a high exit velocity, but his batting average is 120. And it's like, well, you can't just diminish the fact that he doesn't get hits. You know what I mean? Like, hits the ball hard on the ground to the shortstop every time. He's not fast, so there's no benefit there. So let me ask you, as somebody who lived it, as somebody who, was right there in the thick of this sort of transition to a more analytically driven game, what is your opinion as to where the role of these analytics and advanced statistics should play in the game? You kind of already touched on it, but how much do you think it should be involved?
Well, I got to pay attention to a guy because I live in Florida and I watched a lot of games down here in Florida. I watched a guy with the Miami Marlins hit 400 who didn't care if the ball came off his bat at 70 miles an hour or 170 miles an hour. He kept hitting it where nobody was standing. And there's a place for that in the game. Not everybody has to have 110 mile per hour exit velocities. There are guys whose part of their job is to get on base. I mean, I go back and I think about the Rod Carews and the Wade Boggses and the Tony Gwynns. Those guys could have hit home runs, but they wanted to hit. And they just kept hitting balls where nobody was at. And so you look up and they're on base at a 400 clip and let the guys behind them drive them in. I go watch games today and I'm watching 14, 15 strikeouts a night because everybody wants to hit the ball hard. There's some times when a batted ball is dangerous. We used to say it. I watched David Wright one night beat Mariano Rivera with a jam single bloop to right field. We won a game because he put the ball in play. And that's what the game has always been about and should be about. It's hard to hit. And, we can all swing hard. And years ago, there were guys who used to say, well, he's one of these guys that if he swings as hard as he can and if he hits it, he does damage. Well, you know what? How about making more contact and doing more damage? And then letting some of the guys who really have the ability. Pete Alonso, to me, he's one of the best RBI guys in baseball. Why wouldn't you want to get on base in front of Pete Alonso and score 125 runs, no matter how hard you hit it? And so I go back to when I took the job in New York. On base was so important. Sandy preached it. That's how we won. We won because we got on base, and he went out and got 2 or 3 guys that drove those runs in, and that's how you win.
Ibby, I know you want to ask Terry a question. I'm going to jump back into the comments really quick before we do. Paul Revere saying Terry was underrated. We need more of his type in baseball. And we have stellar Justin Lopez, who don't throw tomatoes at him, guys. He's a friend of mine, but he is a Yankees fan, so I appreciate the support jumping in here. And he's just saying it sickens me how much starters are babied. And, there's that old adage with a lot of, you've heard it a million times. Ibby, I know Ron Darling has talked about it. Tom Seaver, the late, great Tom Seaver talked about it. I had a pitch count. Kuzman had a pitch count, and Ryan had a pitch count, and Gentry had a pitch count. They were all different. Mine was 140. His was 130. Well, who was 100? One size fits all doesn't work. It doesn't work in clothing. It doesn't work in baseball pitchers. It's just, to me, that's the thing. I understand you want to keep these finely tuned athletic machines at their peak performance, and health is, the number one ability is availability. But I don't know, man. I think there is too much about babying these guys. You look at Blake Snell coming out in that World Series game. There's just so many examples of it. It's frustrating.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I think there's a place for analytics. I think analytics is great for coaches. Great for coaches. You've got a guy who's his breaking ball, it's not working, and you look at his numbers and his spin rate's down. Then this should be a guy that should be able to teach a better grip to get a better spin rate. I mean, that's what it's for. But to walk up to a guy and say, hey, we got to get your spin rate up, and he's got to look. He looks at you with a blank face. Okay, great, but how? There are some guys who can't spin the ball. guys. There are some big league pitchers who just don't have the ability to spin the ball at certain rates. So you know what you got to do? You got to find out something else for them to get an out. And, I'm still saying, and of course today everybody throws 100, but I'll tell you what, you give me a guy that can get, when the time comes in, it's a tough situation, that he can throw a ball on knee high on the outside corner. I want that guy, because I know, you don't see balls in that location hit out of the ballpark.
It's a great point. Ibby, go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I mean, talking about great players that you've had the opportunity to be in the dugout with and share time with. And obviously talk about analytics and how things have changed in general when it comes to pitching and things of that nature. I have to bring up a player that is probably still a sour note for some Mets fans, but not us here. I'm more focused on what they did while they were here, and that being one, Jacob deGrom. And the question I have to ask you is, just out of pure curiosity, oftentimes it's often joked about how the game where Jake got roughed up, where he gave up the 8 runs and we saw him crying in the dugout and you next to him consoling him, saying whatever it is that you were saying. People often look back on that and say, that's the moment that Jake became Jacob deGrom. Like, that's when he became this monster that we all knew and loved while he was here. I'm just curious on your take when it comes to that moment in general and, from that moment and then moving forward, what Jake became as a pitcher. Well,
first of all, he's a tremendous competitor. He always was when I got him. But, years and years ago, I heard one of the old managers tell me there are 2 kind of players in baseball, in Major League Baseball. There are the ones who've been humbled and the ones who will be humbled. And then that's what separates them. And when you learn how to get through those tough times, when you learn how to deal with adversity and deal with failure, you're going to become successful. And that's what basically all I told Jake is, hey, you had a bad outing. It comes with the territory. In 4 days, you're going back out there. So you know what? We're going to blow off tonight. Forget about it. And we're going to get ourselves prepared for your next start, because we can't do anything about yesterday and last night or tonight. It's over. So let's get ourselves prepared. And because you're still one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. And Jake, I know how hard he worked. I'm going to tell you guys, you wouldn't have believed the film studies he did after that night to go find what happened in that game that he could fix so that it never happened again. And that's why he became great in my mind.
Well, it's funny because when you say that, like, I believe you that we would have no idea, like, this type of stuff that he looked at, but the proof was in the pudding, because, I mean, he went on, like Ibby said, that was really the deGrom coming out party, and how appropriate that we have 48 people watching as we're talking about Jacob deGrom. Terry, before we head into the break, the last question I want to ask you before we break for a second, and everybody watching live, it's just a 20-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show, so don't go anywhere. Plenty more time with Terry Collins. 2015 was strange because, you guys were not the best team in baseball right out of the gate. Far from it. You had your struggles. It was the classic case of a team that really showed the front office that they should be, quote unquote, rewarded by having that roster bolstered. But even as we approached that, there was the Familia game. There was all the stuff with Wilmer Flores and Carlos Gomez. Will it happen? It didn't happen. Him crying on the field and getting Cespedes, and of course, getting some of the other unsung heroes of that trade deadline in Juan Uribe and Kelly Johnson. And so when did you know that 2015 was special? When did you know that this team could really go on a run?
Well, we had the great pitching. We had those great starting staff. The guy we forget about is Bartolo Colon, and what an impact he did on that club, because he was an inning-eating machine. So you knew we had this great pitching, and we started winning some close games. Guys were getting big hits, and David was hurt at the time, if you guys remember. So we didn't ride him, we didn't ride Murph, we didn't ride Duda, but they just seemed like certain guys would come up big, and all of a sudden, when the trading deadline started and we started adding pieces, the clubhouse attitude changed. They started to believe they were good enough. When you in walks Kelly Johnson, and then in walks Juan Uribe, and in walks Addison Reed and Tyler Clippard, and then you go get the big dog and Cespedes, and they all of a sudden said, hey, the front office thinks we're good enough that we can win this thing. And it changed the attitude completely. And at that time, I said, you know what? We got a chance to be dangerous, because, again, every night I ran out somebody who could beat you. There wasn't a time I left my apartment and drove into the city field where I thought, well, we don't stand a chance tonight. I said, hey, if this guy has this good stuff, I got to figure out how to score 2 runs because that's going to be enough to win a game.
You know, it's funny. Somebody said that in the comments earlier, and I didn't star it, so I can't go back to it. But somebody said, "Man, you had a great pitching staff, and you really did. And you nailed it right there." Okay, I was a little disingenuous. I do have one follow-up question because a lot of people are asking about, a Mets vent said, "All I want is Juan Uribe and Mike Nickia stories." Of course, tongue in cheek, but Uribe has always had a reputation of being a bit of a character. And, when he got there, and I say that with respect, of course, to him as a ball player too, but did he bring a certain kind of lightheartedness to the clubhouse when he came over?
You guys heard the stories. I know you have. So, yeah, he is, without a question, one of the best teammates, best clubhouse guys I've ever been around. You know what? He knew his role. He was no longer a starter. He got himself ready to play. The only thing he ever wanted, hey, just let me know when I'm going to play. So, and I did. I let him know, hey, look, you're playing tomorrow night. He got himself ready. He can still hit. He was dangerous. But his leadership in that clubhouse. So we had a bunch of them. We forget about Michael Kadire, what a great leader he was. Granderson. And those guys started with the big championship belt every night for the most valuable player that night. And that stuff changed, it made coming to the ballpark fun. The guys had fun being there. And even if we lost a tough game, you'd walk through it and you could see, hey, look, it's part of the game. We'll get them tomorrow. And that whole attitude started a lot of times with Juan Uribe.
Yeah, you know what? I think it shows. And I think Mets fans really just loved Juan Uribe and what he brought to the team. And I think that not just him, I think there are the types, like obviously Granderson, very, very business, go about business the right way kind of player. But, Granderson's such a nice guy. And, there's like something to be said there of not a goofiness, but just hey guys, like, let's go out there and just play baseball, man. Let's bring that to the table. So, not just Uribe, but, it was like the third time somebody asked about Uribe. So I had to bring it up. Let's head into the break. We got about a half an hour left with Terry Collins. Again, for everybody who is watching live, the break is just 20 seconds. It's a quick ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. So it's John Sapanaro. It's Matt Ibanez. It is Tilt Mets Do Us Part. And our guest this week, the legendary, the one and only Terry Collins. We will be right back.
Okay.
Yo, just like that, we are back with Tilt Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. Where your questions, your comments, your concerns, all that good stuff come in real time. We can see it. We can react to it. Of course, we can pose it to Terry as well. We're doing the best we can, getting through all the comments. There are a lot of them. While you're watching the video, hit the thumbs up button to let us know that you like what you're seeing, what you're listening to. And yes, like Ibby said, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn the notifications on so that you never miss an opportunity to know, 1, when we're going live, 2, who we might be going live with, because as you can see, our little podcast has the opportunity to get some amazing, amazing guests like the one and only Terry Collins. So, Terry, just to piggyback off what we were talking about a bit ago, we've got Daniel Murphy, Yoenis Cespedes, Matt Harvey, all critical parts of that run in 2015. And of course, it takes a team. But when you look at that, let's talk about Cespedes first. I know you and I talked a little bit about him at the QBC, kind of off the record. So, Cespedes had a weird reputation. Not weird like Juan Uribe. Weird, maybe skewed towards the negative before he got here to the Mets. And, obviously his entire Mets tenure, not great, but you can make a case that Yoenis Cespedes is the greatest deadline trade that the Mets have ever had. I mean, he went on a run that was unbelievable.
Unreal.
And like you said, he was the finishing piece there. So, Yoenis Cespedes and have you ever seen anything like that in all your years of managing where somebody just goes on a run like that?
Well, again, I had not seen him live. I'd never seen him live play a game. But I was lucky enough to have a relationship with Jim Leland, who called me and said, hey, we're going to trade this guy when he was with the Tigers. And Jim said, get him. That's all he said. And Sandy was in my office at the time. And when I was done after the end of the game, I called Jim back and said, tell me about him. He said, Terry, this guy can be the best player in baseball. And that's what we saw. We saw a guy who came to the city and said, I'm going to, you know what? I got a chance to win, and winning means a lot to these guys. But he was challenged enough to show everybody, hey, how good can you be? And we saw how good he can be.
Yeah, and another guy who kind of picked up the torch, right, Ibby, was Daniel Murphy, because, obviously Cespedes did his thing in getting the Mets, to where they were going in the playoffs.
Right.
And then in the playoffs, it was number 28.
It was number 20, and I'm glad you threw it to me, because I was such a huge. I still am. I love Murphy. He's one of my favorite players on the Mets. Just a bona fide hitter.
I've been trying to get him on the show.
Yeah, gap to gap guy, doubles hitter. Went out there, busted his ass every single time, and it always showed. I know people ragged on him, Mets fans and people that weren't even fans of the team, about his defense and things like that, but. He always went out there. It seemed like he busted his ass to be a great hitter. So, Terry, my question to you is simply, how satisfying was it for you during that 2015 run to see that he was finally basically getting his roses, getting his flowers, if you will, for the hard work that he put in and becoming, look, did everyone think he was going to become this incredible home run hitter, 8 home runs in the postseason, do everything he did? Probably not. But the fact that it did happen, what was it like for you to see all that hard work finally pay off for him?
Well, if you get to know Murphy, and you guys do, this guy is a workaholic, and he's a baseball player, and he loves the game. He talks the game all the time. And you know what? And again, once in a while, you got to give credit where credit's due. And at first it starts with Dan, because he made some adjustments, but it came from our hitting coaches. Kevin Long and Pat Ressler said they did some studies and said, Murph, when you hit the ball in the air, here's what you do damage-wise. And when you hit it on the ground, this is what you do. And Dan said, well, I guess they better start hitting the ball in the air then. And so he made the change. Justin Turner did, but Murph made the change because he could do it. Some guys can't do it. Dan could. He knew himself well enough. He knew his swing well enough that he could make those adjustments. But I never saw anything like I saw in the playoffs. I mean, it must have been like the third or fourth game against the Dodgers, and Murph hit another home run, and we looked at each other on the bench. Everybody said, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Because we knew he could hit, but the power came out it was unbelievable. And I mean, he hit him off Stars. He hit him off Kershaw. He hit him off Greinke. I mean, it was one after another. And again, when you get to know Dan, and he's always kind of been in the shadows a little bit, but he went out, and I'll tell you guys something. In spring training, when I told him he was going to be the second baseman, every day he never left the batting cage without using the pitching machine so he could work on turning double plays at second base. Learned how to get the ball out of it, make the transfer, make his feet work. And so it all tied in, and he made himself a great player.
Yeah, and honestly, like watching Daniel Murphy, he's one of those guys so easy to root for. Such a great story. And it's funny when you say, who is this guy? I mean, for that 2015 playoff run, he was Barry Bonds. And I don't say that lightly. Like, that's the kind of run Bonds went on in 2002. Like, that's what he was doing. So absolutely insane to watch it. And, this is a sentiment that a lot of people had at the time. And I know this is forever ago. But Chris Ferraro saying, Murphy should have been re-signed. And I'm not going to ask you to comment on what Gary Cohen said at the time, of course, legendary Mets broadcaster. But, he did call Daniel Murphy a net negative when he wasn't re-signed. And I don't think that the flack that he got was necessarily fair, because I think there was a section of Met fans that felt that way. They didn't love the defense, and they thought that he was maybe more of a one-dimensional player. And, of course, he went on to have this amazing run with Washington. But did you think, and I know you said you couldn't expect it, but did you think that maybe he unlocked something in that playoff run? And did you think that the Mets made a mistake not bringing him back? And did you, if you want to share, if you advocated for them to bring him back?
Well, I will tell you, I did talk to Sandy about bringing him back. And, but again, I will tell you something, guys. As a manager, I didn't get involved in that side of it. That was Sandy's job. And I'd already told you, hey, look, he didn't come down and tell me who to play, and I didn't tell him how to run his job. So, you know what? I love Murph. I wanted Murph back. I thought he got it. I thought that run at the end of the season, this guy said, hey, it just happens sometimes. It clicks in some place, and it clicked for Murph. And you know what? So when he left and went to the Nats, I rooted for him. Except when we played him. I mean, he used to kill us, as you guys know. But you got to be happy for guys like that. That's the same thing with, like I said earlier about Justin Turner. I love Justin Turner. I always wanted him on my team, but he went out and made himself a better player. And, once in a while, you got to give those guys, the pats on the back because they're the ones who did it.
I hate to bounce around because I do want to ask you one more thing about 2015, which I know you talk about all the time. But, Ibby, this is the second time that Terry has brought up Justin Turner.
We're on the same wavelength there.
Terry, on this show, when we don't have guests, obviously we give our own opinions. We opine about who the Mets should get and why and all this stuff. And from a fan perspective, Ibby and I love Justin Turner.
Yes.
Ibby and I think Justin Turner, even at, what is he, 38, 39 years old
39
now?
years old.
I think Justin Turner can still hit, and I think Justin Turner should be signed by the Mets to be there most of the time DH, some of the time third base, some of the time backing up Pete at first base. He can still hit. He had a career high in plate appearances with Boston last year because they followed the blueprint to keep him healthy, and he was productive. So we are team Justin Turner. Your thoughts on whether or not Justin Turner?
Put me on that team. Give me a spot on the bench on that team.
Which is crazy because Terry, sorry to cut you off, but the question that I had on here, one of my questions, and that's why I was also laughing, is because we're on the same wavelength here when it comes to talking points. 2011 to 2013, you had Justin Turner as a player, and the way I wrote it was, what was he like? Obviously, we saw that he had such success the moment he left New York to go to LA. You just mentioned about making adjustments and willing to go through those adjustments to become better and better yourself overall as a player. So he had extreme success the moment he left here, which is upsetting because obviously we wanted him to do well while he was here. But what was he like to you in terms of clubhouse presence and what he brought to the team in that sense? Because with the team now, like we're saying, we want Turner because we think he can still hit. But I also think that a team that is in transition, bringing in young players, having someone like Turner, I believe, would do well for the clubhouse and making that team progress and take that next step. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. This guy has won. Look where he's been and what he's done. He's won. He's been on a team that wins. And to have that presence of a veteran guy who, by the way, played very good for us. He did, he was a backup player and was my best player off the bench at the times when he was there. He could play second, he could play short, he could play third. Now he could even play first base. He went out and learned how to get the ball again, learn how to get the ball in the air. But he's always been a steady player, and his clubhouse presence. This guy, when he was in New York, he was the guy that led all the fun stuff before he was gone in 2015. But he led all the fun. I'll tell you a quick story about him. In 2015, I brought in Noah Syndergaard to face him. In game 5, and Noah came in and I wanted him to get Justin Turner out of the bullpen. He threw him a 101, 102, a 93 mile an hour slider, another 100, and struck him out with a 94 mile an hour slider. Justin sent me a text when the game was over and said, "Really? Was that necessary?" And here's a guy who lost a big game and yet still had the presence to make a little fun with it.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, I've had the privilege of being in, the clubhouses here in LA. So, at Dodger Stadium and down in Anaheim as well. And so I've met Justin Turner a couple times, and he is that, and I'm not there in a capacity where I'm trying to be a thorn on the side or whatever. And I don't work in the media out here. So it wasn't in that capacity, but just, meeting him, being around, and, there's some people, and it's fair, there are some ball players or some people in general who don't want anything to do with people they don't know, and that's fine. But Justin was completely the opposite. Every day you walked in, how you doing? Hello. He was very gracious and very, very ever present to just, be a nice guy. So, I think that's part of it too with Turner. And honestly, of the two, Terry, because of where the Mets were when they let Murphy go financially and with the Wilpons and just everything where, things were a little bit tighter, tightening the belt, so to speak. I could see why they let Murphy go to get a deal that maybe they didn't want to pay him or they didn't think they could pay him. The Turner one always stung a bit more because, he was let go for nothing. He was non-tendered. And I didn't think Justin Turner would go on and have this career, but I agree with you. I was always steadfast. Great guy off the bench, could play all over the infield, and he was a clutch hitter. And to me, that was the one that really burned me because they just let him go.
Let him go. Yeah.
And so, I just, that always hurt me a little more, I guess. The last person I want to talk to you about with regards to 2015 is Matt Harvey. A lot of people are asking about it. There's some general questions like this from S-Man. How does Terry feel about Matt Harvey? Look, obviously what happened to Harvey with the thoracic outlet syndrome is such a bummer. Derailed what could have been a Hall of Fame career. It's just absolutely stunning the way that he burst on the scene. I was there in the rain by myself at that game when the crowd at Citi Field is the first ever matchup between Matt Harvey and Steven Strasburg, when people started chanting Harvey's better. I was there by myself on that cold, rainy day. I had 4 tickets. Everybody backed out because it was too rainy and too cold. And I went, and honestly, that's one of the most fun I've ever had at a ball game. So, just your thoughts on Harvey and what he meant to you guys in that 2015 run when he put everything aside to pitch past his innings limit. And then just, obviously you've commented on Harvey before, but, what your feelings are with Matt Harvey now.
Well, when he burst on the scene, when he came up, I was the field coordinator when we signed Matt, when Matt was drafted. And I got to, first met him, once he signed and came into the minor league system, and when he got to AAA, we finally called him up. I didn't, all the report, and I, due to my minor league background, I read every report on these guys. Never did I read anything like what I saw. Never. I mean, he was 93, 94. This guy comes into Arizona that night. He's 98, 93, 92 mile an hour slider, good changeup, great athlete, could hit, and again, injuries hurt Matt a lot. But in 2015, early in the year, we knew we had innings limits on these guys, and I was trying to come up with ways to be able to get these guys to be ready, still have them available in September. I didn't want to burn them up so many. So I thought about going to a 6-man, and Matt Harvey came. He said, "No, I want to pitch every 5th day." Well, then halfway through the season, something came and got involved, and I think it had to do with his representatives that said, "Look, you got to take care of yourself." And so he decided he didn't want, we had to back him down innings wise. And I pitched him one night against the Yankees in Citi Field. He pitched 5 innings, pitched very, very well. Yeah. People were, going crazy. I took him out of the game after 5 innings, and he was upset and walked in my office the next day. He said, I want the baseball. Give me the baseball. And so, guys, when it came to Game 5, that's why I gave him the baseball. And this guy should have been, in my opinion, had the thoracic outlet surgery. I think really, really hurt him a lot. But this guy could have been, just like you said, he could have been a Hall of Famer. He was so good.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not saying this because you're on the show right now. I've always been of the school of thought that Harvey needed that ball in that World Series game. I know hindsight is 2020, and I'm sure people have asked you about this a million times since, not just in the post game that day, but what Harvey meant, what Harvey was doing, who Harvey was at the time. I mean, there was no reason to not going back to the first half of the show when you said sometimes you just got to go with your gut as a manager, and a guy tells you he's pitching the way he's pitching, and a guy says, I want the ball, Skip. You got to go to him. I mean, that's anybody who says otherwise has never been in your shoes forget about it as a manager, has never made a hard decision in their life.
And the people that are claiming that, they should have took him out or whatever. It's like, no, I was there that night, upper deck, left field, watching that game. Everyone in that building, in our section, whatever it was, they were checking Twitter. They were checking the screens. When they saw him go up to you, say whatever it is that he said to you about wanting to go back out there, that's what everyone assumed that was said. Everyone was championing for him to go back on that mound, to go along with what John was just saying, how it was, he had to be the guy to go out there. It was supposed to be this iconic moment. He was supposed to be at the middle of it. The nickname, everything. It just didn't work. It happens. But I had no Monday morning quarterback, nothing with it. I sat there, or I was standing there in those seats with my buddy TJ, who I'm sure is listening to the show right now. I was standing there and I was saying, send his ass back out there. So when he went out there and the place erupted, it was the right thing to do. So I hate when everyone always second guesses it. It's like, it was the right thing to do. No doubt in my mind.
Well, thanks.
Terry,
it's easy afterwards to say, well, you should have taken him out. I had a guy down here who I played golf with one day. The first thing when I first met the guy, he said, I'd have taken Matt Harvey out. And I said, well, I just met the guy, and I said, well, I got 48,000 people who disagree with you. So
Don't you? I mean, I'm sure it's easier now that you're not actively managing and stuff. But it's so funny to me, like when we talk to players or we talk to managers, whatever, and people are like, "Oh yeah, I met this guy on the street," and they're just like, "Yeah, I wouldn't have done that." You're like, "Oh, okay. Well, can I have my hot dog, please?" And then we can continue this conversation.
Yeah.
It's just that's such a wild existence, especially in New York, because I know you dealt with that, right? Like getting your cup of coffee in the morning or picking up a newspaper. Like we were talking off air before we got started of like the reactionary nature of New York sports fans, and it's just like you had to deal with that every day. Like, man, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't have pitch hit for Cespedes in that game. You're like, okay, man, I don't know. Jeez, good to know. Hey, I'll call you up next time.
Today. Still today.
Yeah.
In New York, I get it.
The guy can't play golf. He's retired. He can't play golf without you guys hitting him with questions. No. So I posed this question to you from Tom. I actually had it jotted down too, kind of as we were talking about different players from 2015. Now, I will preface it by saying you're not a medical professional. You're not a doctor. You're not a pitching coach. You've never been a pitcher. So with all of that being said, the question from Tom is, having worked with Noah Syndergaard, is there anything that you think he needs to do to get his career back on track? Now, again, health issues there with the Tommy John surgery, but most pitchers in Major League Baseball come back from their first Tommy John surgery as good, if not better. The second one is when it gets a little iffy. So we're talking about DeGrom having a second one and even Shohei Ohtani having a second one and what that's going to be like. But the first one, guys usually come back, and it seems like the stuff and everything is just not the same for Noah. And I know that the surgery could be part of it, but in your opinion, just kind of having seen him and worked with him so closely, is there something else, or is there something he can do, you think, that he's not doing?
Well, again, I haven't been around Noah in a while, but I'll tell you guys this. Nobody ever worked harder between starts than Noah. Nobody. And to this day, I talked to Noah when he was let go this summer, and one of the things I just ran by him, I said, he's in such tremendous shape, physical shape. He doesn't have to get stronger. Yeah. You know what? Hey, look, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with trimming down and getting that flexibility back a little bit more. But due to the way they pitch today, everybody has to throw 100 miles an hour, and this guy already could throw 100 miles an hour. Yeah. But you got to pitch up in the strike zone. Noah got success when he pitched down in the strike zone. He was 98 to 101 with sinkers and got easy ground balls, got easy outs instead of 100 pitch 5 inning outings. He was now throwing 8 innings with 100 pitches because he got outs on 2 and 3 pitches. And I told Noah on the phone, there's nothing wrong with doing what you do best and letting that work for you. And that is go back to that 2-seam fastball, let it work down in the zone. You still got a good arm, and I just hope he bounces back because I'll tell you what, guys, he pitched a big game in 2015, but he pitched some huge games in 2016 that got us to the playoffs.
Absolutely. I mean, when
100%.
When Harvey's down and DeGrom is down and,
right.
You're really leaning on Syndergaard to be the ace of that staff alongside the unsung heroes of Seth Lugo and Robert Gesellman, who really stepped up that year and pitched meaningful starts. This is a great comment from Carson, kind of encapsulating everything we were talking about before with Harvey. Your ace wants the ball on the big stage. You give him the ball. And I just wanted to pull that up because it's the ultimate truth right there. Terry, look, we can't do an interview with you without talking about one of, I think, the funniest, coolest, best moments, viral moments in the history of the Mets. And CJ's comment from Twitter, you got to give us a chance. So, Ibby, I have a question about this, but I know that I'll let you lead the way on this, and I've got a follow-up.
Okay, so I guess the first part of the question was, or what would be to you, did it shock you how crazy everyone went once that audio and that visual dropped on social media, how viral it went? And then the follow-up to that is, do you think it'd be in baseball's best interest to really lean into situations like that and run with it? Because if we're being honest, when that first came out, MLB did everything that they could to take it down. It wasn't like they wanted to make it a point where you weren't able to see it. And then it kind of went away, and then people started ripping it and downloading it and posting it more and more to see. I feel that that's a great thing for the game, as hilarious as it was. You know, I feel like that's something that baseball should be leaning into. Do you agree with that?
You know, if I will tell you, there's a part of me. I mean, obviously, I get huge reactions to this day. But there were some things that went on that, you know, I certainly didn't want that kind of language out there. I didn't know the guy was mic'd.
Right.
Or I never would have said some of
understand.
those things I said. I mean, I got grandkids, for heaven's sake.
It was very colorful, Terry.
It was colorful. It was great. It was colorful.
I understand that. But so, you know, my whole take on it was, you know, everybody kept saying, you know, God, you were so passionate to, you know, back up your players. Yeah, that's who I am. I'm not, you know, I'm not shocked by what happened. I mean, I was a little shocked they kicked him out of the game, but, you know, I don't think I wish there was a way. I guess what I'm saying is it gives people a chance to show that how important it is for the manager to, you know, back up his players or to go out. And that's why, I used to love the manager umpire relationship. And by the way, Tom Hallion and I are very good friends. I wasn't mad at Tom Hallion, you know.
Right.
And that's the thing that is, you know, misplaced in the whole thing. I just wished somebody would have called me ahead of time and said, "Hey, by the way, we want you to know this has gotten out," because I didn't hear about it, and all of a sudden my phone blew up. Yeah. And I called MLB and said, "Is there an apology coming down here? How did this leak out?" Yeah. You know, because it's not supposed to, but it did. And now I live with it every day. And you know what? I can laugh about it today, but back then it wasn't that funny when it first came out, I'll tell you.
Well, you know, it's funny. That's some of the comments. Joel C saying best moment ever, but then Patty saying it wasn't hilarious to Terry at the moment. And Carson always with a good one saying I was more upset that Syndergaard missed his target.
Well, the one thing I will say is I was at that game. I took my wife to that game, and we had great seats in the porch. It was my first time seeing Noah pitch. Every time I went to the games, I would always see Wheeler and other guys throwing at Mets games, especially when I brought my wife. And then we finally get to see Noah pitch. And then, you know, it's 86 weekend. I'm all pumped up. I got all my stuff. We sit down, and the next thing you know, Noah's out, and he gets tossed. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I come here. It's kind of cold out. I thought I was going to have a great time. The wife's here. Everything was going great. And all of a sudden, that happened. So for the longest time, I had a sour taste about that game. But then once that clip dropped, I was like, you know, I can at least say I was there for that. So there's always that.
Well, so my follow-up, Terry, is there are 5 people famously involved in that incident. You, Tom Hallion, Noah Syndergaard, Chase Utley, of course.
Of course, yeah.
And then poor Ty Kelly, who we've had on this show. We had Ty Kelly on the show. We talked to him about it, and he was just like, man, it's like my 3rd start ever in the big leagues. I'm filling in at third base. And if you go back and you watch that clip, he is so prominently featured. Like his face, he's just okay. So have you talked to Ty? I don't know if you still talk to Ty Kelly a lot. It seems like you have a good relationship with a lot of your ex-players, but what was the moment like afterward, like talking to Ty? Did you talk to him, like, you know, in the clubhouse afterward, in the dugout? Like, hey, this is a young guy just filling in that day.
Yeah, you know, on the spur of the moment, I really didn't want to talk to anybody except Noah. You know, that was because I said the same thing when in the clubhouse when I walked in there, and I walked up to him and I said, just tell me why you didn't leave a mark. Bruise. Why is there no bruise on this guy? Yeah. I mean, I get it. I understood it all. I'd have backed it up but miss him? So he was the only guy I talked to. And, you know, when the time happened, I've seen Ty since. I never really brought it up because, you know, I try not to watch the videos if I can help it because I lived it. So I don't really need to see it in action.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. You know, Ty is another one of those guys. He's a bit of a character. He's a character on social media. He was super fun on our show. And, you know, when we talked to him, it's a couple of years ago now, he was I think he had just signed a minor league deal trying to make a major league comeback and everything. And, you know, but still just very genuine. And he was like, yeah, man, it felt really out of place being up there. You know, he's like, here's all these people. I'm kind of thrust in the middle of it. He's like, I know how to be a good teammate. He's like, but I don't really even know what's going on. He was like, I'm just trying to keep my head down. And So we got a minute or so left with you.
Yeah.
I could talk to you all day. We could talk to you all day. Thank you once again for
Thank you
doing
so
this. We don't
much.
want to
Yeah.
keep you too long, but I think we have to bring up the other person involved in that situation, which is, Chase Utley. And Rael saying, he's obviously on the Hall of Fame ballot now. And, Chase Utley was a great player, but there's a lot of really, listen, fans hate players. That's what they do. They love some, they hate some. That's how it goes, right? We don't hate them as people, but it is what it is. Chase Utley is probably, for most Met fans, at least currently, the most hated player because of what happened with Ruben Tejada and everything. And I'm not going to just ask you point blank if you think he's a dirty player or anything, but that's the reputation he has. Just what do you think about Utley? What do you think about that situation that happened? And, does your thoughts or anything change? I mean, you just echoed what I said. He's a great player. Does your thoughts all these years later, has it changed with him being on the Hall of Fame ballot and everything? Just what's your thoughts on Chase Utley nowadays?
Well, I will tell you, when I first saw, we played the Phillies a lot, and I watched Chase a lot, and he played hard. He always played hard. But there's a time when you just play the game, and that is slide into the guy. He didn't hit the ground. He hit Tejada. That's illegal. And that's what I was trying to get the umpire. We should have been out of the inning. Not that we would have won the game, but I just felt he went overboard on the slide itself, where he took him out, which, I by the way, I was a middle infielder and I got knocked down a lot of times, and I understand that. But by not sliding, you're pretty much trying to really hurt this guy. And that's what I didn't like about Chase. And by the way, he should be. I hope he gets in the Hall of Fame. He was a great player. I mean, I hated facing him. I don't care where he was, Phillies or in LA, he was a thorn in my side. And but that was the one instance where I just felt it was uncalled for.
Rael saying, "Damn straight, Terry, he was playing football." And I think that's the thing, right? Like, we could all have our opinions on whether or not he's a dirty player and has a history of it. I would say, I don't want to speak for you, Terry, but I think for me and Ibby, we could all say that was a dirty play. Intentionally, right. Unintentionally, who knows? But that's not baseball. What he did in that instance was not baseball. Didn't slide near the bag. Didn't really even slide in a lot of ways. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, Carson saying, correction, Terry, with all due respect, it wasn't a slide, it was a tackle. I think that's, I think that's where a lot of people land on it.
Right.
We do have a lot of questions coming in from people, Terry. And if you have a couple more minutes, we could just rapid fire throw some of these at you, if that's cool with you.
Okay, that'd be fine, guys.
Grant, who great commenter, runs a great Mets Twitter account. Who he just got it back. He got suspended. It was nonsense, and it's back after like 5 months or 10 months, whatever. Congratulations to Grant for getting it back. We talked a little bit about this, but who was the funniest player you ever coached, Terry?
Oh gosh, the funniest guy I ever coached. I'll tell you what, Justin Turner was pretty funny. He did some funny stuff. He was always clowning around and doing stuff in the clubhouse. He might have been one of the funniest guys I've ever been around.
Okay. You know what? I figured you might say that, and that would have been my guess. Here's another unsung guy. Didn't go on to have the career that Murphy or Turner had, but Mets vent saying, how valuable was TJ Rivera in 2016?
Oh my God! Out of nowhere,
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. Because I read the minor league reports, I always read that this guy could hit. I mean, and I talked to the minor league coaches, and they said, "Listen, this guy can really hit." And so when we brought him up, again, when you bring up a guy out of AAA and you're just hoping that he can, he keeps his head above water and contributes a little bit. This guy carried us. This guy was so big. I mean, we got in that playoff game, and there was one guy that I said he probably hit second or third in the lineup against Bumgarner. But TJ Rivera really was a huge piece of the 2016 team.
We've got another one. This is a kind of a big question, so summarize it as quickly as you can. Obviously, you don't work for the Mets anymore. You're not involved with them, but you're active, obviously, in baseball, just as a fan, as somebody who's been in it his whole life. So, as quickly as you could sum it up, what do you think of the 2024 Mets, their approach? I know there's a lot of people here now that, you never worked with or for, Steve Cohen and David Stearns on down. And, so I'm sure there are some other holdovers with your life in baseball, people who may have still been here or with you in other places. But just what do you think of the 2024 Mets? They're really it seems like Stearns is trying to reset some things. And there's an emphasis on, run prevention that he keeps talking about, which I know you love. You got to play defense. You got to play the game the right way. So what are your thoughts on the 2024 Mets from Chris Farrar?
Well, I love their lineup. I still think they got a very, very good lineup. And what they've got, what they're doing right now, in my opinion, they're looking for guys who can eat up some innings. They're looking for, the middle range starting pitching guys that, you can go out there and give you 5 or 6 and keep the game under control. I think they've got to go out and obviously get a couple more relievers for themselves because, again, bullpens are so important. And I hope they find that guy that they can put in the middle of that lineup as a DH who can produce runs. Somebody's got to protect Pete. Somebody, you've got to have somebody hit behind Pete Alonso that they, and by the way, guys, make no mistake about it. It's going to be a guy who's going to get the big at bats because they're going to pitch around Pete Alonso. There's one guy, that's just the way the game is. And so you've got to have that guy who can be dangerous, who can produce some runs for you. But I like their team. I think, I think David, obviously, they didn't get a couple of the big fish they wanted to get. But, they've got some guys into Severino bounces back. I mean, my God, he may be the best free agent sign they've ever had.
Yeah. We talked to a couple people and a former pitcher and a former hitter that said there is no way with Severino's stuff, and he's still in the top 5 in terms of fastball velocity for starting pitchers, and he's in the top 5 in terms of break for pitchers. There is no way with his stuff that he could get touched up to the tune of 6.65 ERA without tipping pitches. Now, I don't know if that's true. Those are just 2 people's opinions, but 2 former major leaguers that said it. I agree with you. I think he's primed for a bounce back if they could figure it out.
Well, another thing, he's not pitching at Yankee Stadium anymore. We're in the big boy ballpark in Citi Field.
We got Tom that says, were you surprised when Bartolo hit his home run?
Shocked. I couldn't get him to take batting practice. But I told you guys have heard me say this. Pat Ressler, who just became the Yankee assistant hitting coach, he told me, because Pat's job was to make sure all the pitchers got batting practice. He told me one day, he said, one of these days, he's going to ambush somebody. He said, Terry, he's got, we all knew he was big and strong. He said, one of these days, he's going to run into a fastball. And sure enough, that was the day.
Yeah. All right. We could do one more really quick from Subway to Shea. How much was David Wright missed in the clubhouse from 2016 on?
Immensely. I can't even put it into words. His presence in the clubhouse, his presence on the field, when we made him the captain, it was not because he could give speeches. It was because of the way he played the game, the way he respected the game, got prepared to play the game, his respect for the media, the fans. That's the stuff that makes a difference in the clubhouse, and we missed him immensely.
And this one is just a fun one from Pizza Sports Guy saying, explain exactly what ass in the jackpot means, please.
I have no idea. That was something that Tom used. I never heard that before. I've seen it on, today I've seen it on T-shirts. I said, down here, there's some T-shirts down there. I don't even know what it means. But
I had never heard it before either. And
never heard it, never.
I've never heard it before or since, to be honest, except in referencing that situation. Yes. Ibby, do you have any last ones for Terry before we let him go?
No, I got nothing. I mean, I just wanted to because
we'll do another show, Ib.
No.
Okay, perfect. If you want to come back, you will. Another time.
You know what? Forget it. I will ask one final question. I will because I'm curious. What probably one of, if not my favorite Mets of all time. You said you've had great things to say about him. I believe you consider him a friend as well. Carlos Beltran, clearly, in my eyes at least, a Hall of Famer. I hope he gets in, if not this year, in the coming years. I think he belongs in there. Hands down, one of the best Mets in terms of center field, at least, that I've seen, and I think in their history in general, based off of the numbers that he put up. Could you, I should say, do you think that for Carlos, with his time when he was here, obviously you weren't the manager for the prime of it, but do you think that he catches way too much flack, like he wasn't respected enough? Was he, for as great as he was, since he can go into the Hall as a Met potentially with the Met hat on, do you still think he was underappreciated?
Absolutely. I mean, it goes back to the same thing. We remember one instance where, in the biggest game, maybe in his Met career, where he struck out against Wainwright. Do you know how many guys would have struck out against Adam
No one's
Wainwright.
hitting that pitch.
It just
Everyone.
happens. And so, they hold it against him. And here's one of the best players and one of the best human beings, tremendous father, tremendous teammate. I told you guys the story about when we took him out of center field. He made the decision. He's the one who wanted to do it. And he respected Angel Pagan so much that, he just said that he's better than me right now. And so, he had a great perspective on the game, and he deserves certainly to be in the Hall of Fame. But I'll tell you where he deserves to be, and that's in a dugout somewhere.
I agree with that. And you know what?
1000%.
We don't have the time to talk about it. We're not going to keep you any long on that. But you know what? We could talk about that next time if you do want to come back on with us. And Paul Revere saying he was their best free agent signing, meaning Beltran. And obviously I not joked around, but partially tongue-in-cheek saying it about R.A. Dickey. I think Carlos Beltran is the best free agent signing the Mets have ever made. He's just an unbelievable player and underappreciated. Right. Everybody was striking out against Wainwright in that situation. No one was hitting that curveball. Let's not forget about the fact that he hit 40 home runs that year to get them there. He had, I think, what did he have, 6 home runs in the playoffs or something, Ibby, like to push them there along the way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was unbelievable for them. He just had one bad moment in a big spot that I think anybody would have been in that spot, would have done the same thing. So, Terry, thank you so much for giving us over an hour of your time. This was an absolute blast. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed watching this. Terry Collins, legendary manager of the New York Mets, most games managed in the history of our New York Mets, which, you know what, that is a fantastic title to have. Sub the channel, turn those notifications on, hit your thumbs up buttons, all that fun stuff. We are going to get out of here for the week, but John and Ibby will be back with you next week in our regular time slot. Terry, again, thank you so much for being here. Till Mets do us part, and we will see you guys next time. Take it easy.